Hey, welcome to WTF History, where we examine fucked up shit that's happened in history and equate it to what's going on in current events. I'm your host, Marissa J, and I'm gonna run through this intro. I don't really have intros. I don't know, but this is WTF History. Welcome to this channel. I don't make sensitive content for sensitive people. Consider this your trigger warning for everything, I guess. If you need a trigger warning for anything, I mean, just take this as your trigger warning. You see my face? Just trigger warning. If you want to leave a comment, you're more than welcome to do so. If you want to like the video, if you want to subscribe to the channel, that'd be cool too. If not, that's okay. If you want to thumbs down the video, that's cool. Tell me you're a baby back bitch without saying you're a baby back bitch. Okay, well, I guess that's all the information that you guys really need to know about me before getting started with this video. I do a bunch of random stuff, and it's just going to be a compilation of random shit. Intro, trigger warning, me being weird. Okay, I think I covered everything. Anyway, start the show! These videos rarely turn out to be what I set out to research for. Like this video, for instance, was meant to be about Buffalo Soldiers. But while researching that, I came across a startling revelation. There's been like 150 slave revolts here in America, and it got me thinking, why weren't any of them successful? The only undisputed successful slave rebellion was the Haitian Revolution of 1804. So while digging deeper into it, I came across Meritorious Manumission. Virginia of 1723, the General Assembly passed a law that not only required that every petition for manumission be reviewed by the governor and council of the colony, but it stated that manumission would only be granted if there was evidence that the enslaved person had performed meritorious services. Only the governor and council could decide whether a service was meritorious enough. Why? Because enslaved people figured out how to save up their money and free themselves. So this would be an additional step in purchasing your own freedom. The Roman slaves were paid a wage, which they could save up to purchase their freedom. And even though some enslaved people received small amounts of money, this was the exception, not the rule. Manumission was not always charitable or altruistic. In one of the stories in Arabian Nights, in the Richard Francis Burton translation, a slave owner threatens to free his slave for lying to him. The slave says, "Thou shalt not manumit me, for I have no handicraft whereby to gain my living." Burton Notes, here the slave refuses to be set free and starve. For a master to do so without ample reason is held disgraceful. In ancient Greece, manumission came in many forms. A master choosing to free a slave would most likely only do so at his death, specifying his desire in his will. In rare cases, slaves who were able to earn enough money in their labor were able to buy their own freedom and were known as whatever the fuck this word is. A slave could also be sold fictitiously to a sanctuary from where God could enfranchise him. In very rare circumstances, the city would have franchised a slave. A notable example is that Athens liberated everyone who was present at the Battle of whatever in 406 BC. Once the slave was freed, however, he was not generally permitted to become a citizen, but would become a medic. The former slave could be bound to some continuing duty to the former master and was commonly required to live near the former master. Breaches of these conditions could lead to beatings, prosecution, and re-enslavement. Sometimes extra payments were specified by which a freed slave could liberate himself from such residual duties. However, ex-slaves were able to own property outright, and their children were free of all constraints. Under Roman law, a slave who had been manumitted was a citizen and manumissions were taxed. They were also granted this little hat that they had to wear after they were free. It was like a special hat, it was felt, and only freed slaves could wear it. Like, you get in a lot of trouble if you were like a slave and you were caught wearing this hat. But anyways, it was felt and it had like this emblem of liberty. The former slave was to shave his head and wear the hat instead of his hair. A freed slave would customarily take the former master's name and became a client to his former master, who would now be his patron. A client could serve several patrons. And even though the freed slave became a citizen, not all citizens had the same rights. Like, an ex-slave couldn't hold high offices, but if they were good with business, there was no social limits to the wealth they could amass. In Peru and large parts of Latin America, in addition to freeing slaves in wills, there was baptismal manumission, where an enslaved child would be granted their freedom. In most cases, the child lived with their still enslaved parent, risking the child's re-enslavement. Mothers would pay extra to ensure their child's freedom when they're old enough. This would ensure the loyalty of the enslaved parent. In the Caribbean, manumission laws vary between the colonies. For example, in Barbados, who had the strictest laws, like owners having to pay €200 for male slaves and €300 for female slaves, an ex-slave named Susanna became a successful businesswoman and purchased many of her friends to set free, whereas in other parts of the Caribbean, manumissions were largely undocumented. Now we come to America, where freedom was mostly granted to the enslaved person by their master after the enslaved person paid market rates for themselves to their master. This and testamentary manumission were the most frequent means of manumission with little oversight until the regulation of manumissions in 1692, when Virginia established that to manumit a slave, a person must pay the cost for them to be transported out of the colony. Where were they transported to? I don't know. Were they sent off to like Native American lands? Like Oklahoma? Did they just lump them all with Native Americans? And if so, what tribe would they say they were? If you know where they made all of the ex-slaves go, let me know in the comments, because I couldn't figure it out. In 1723, they revised the law to state that no slave shall be set free upon any pretense whatsoever, except for some meritorious services to be adjudged and allowed by the governor and council. A slave owner could send his slave to fight in a war instead of going himself, with the promise of freedom, but nothing actually concrete. In 1782, the new government of Virginia repealed the former laws and declared freedom for slaves who fought for the colonies during the American Revolutionary War in 1775 to 1783. The law also permitted masters to free their slaves on their own accord. This led to a lot of freed Black people, so the state passed laws forbidding them from moving into the state and requiring newly freed slaves to leave within 1 year unless they had special permission. So Virginia was the first sundown state. The abstract has Set the Devils Free, a 36-page Word document that I'll link in the description below, describes the overall message to perfection. The results also reveal a markedly diminished risk of manumission after Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831. Slave owners apparently balanced two competing forces: the use of selective manumission as a reward mechanism to elicit effort and good behavior among slaves, and a social norm increasingly opposed to liberal manumission, as fears over the increased size and radicalization of the free Black community grew with increases in abolitionist fervor. Meritorious manumissions were sparingly granted. One case of testamentary manumission of a young enslaved girl whose master's will granted her freedom being denied because she didn't do anything particularly special. Having done something particularly special, even without the former master's wish in his will for her to be freed, would have ensured her freedom. Special acts were included and limited to saving the owner's life and/or property, inventing something useful, or snitching. If a slave went and told of another slave's plans to run away or had concrete evidence of an uprising, they were granted their freedom. I can't speak globally, but as for the American slave revolts, in nearly every single one of them, with the exception of the Geechee and Seminoles, somebody snitched. Now, when we hear about how Harriet Tubman would shoot and kill defectors from the Underground Railroad, it makes perfect sense. She understood the dangers and the consequences of letting someone go back. In Gabriel Prosser's rebellion, two slaves who had informed on their masters about the rebellion received their freedom. Denmark Vesey, a freedman who wanted to liberate his enslaved peers, was informed on by an enslaved person who gained their freedom. The 1811 German Coast Uprising in Louisiana, the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history, where they only killed 2 white men and a freed Black man, somebody snitched. Charles DeLonde, one of the organizers of the rebellion, when he was caught, had his hands chopped off, was shot in one thigh and then the other, his legs broken, and was shot in the body. And just before he died, they put him into a bundle of straw and roasted him. These were some of the biggest, most important slave revolts in American history, and they were all thwarted by Meritorious Manumission. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were murdered as a result of William O'Neill being an FBI informant who cowardly took his own life after the Eyes on the Prize interview by running into traffic, causing even more suffering to innocent people by forcing whoever hit him to have to live with the fact that he was too much of a bitch to do it a normal way. When he was caught with a stolen car across state lines at a young age, he accepted a deal with the FBI to not only become an informant on the Black Panthers, but they also gave him a monthly stipend. Considering slavery was replaced by the 13th Amendment after its abolition and the outlaw of manumission of slaves in 1857, how is law enforcement able to get away with having informants? The person being manumitted from serving time is then relabeled a client of their former master, who now, in the modern day, for which the government agent serves as proxy. The mere suggestion from an FBI agent to a civilian to become an informant should be illegal. But what would be the charge? I don't know, but this still happens today, which is why the no snitching policy is still widely upheld within the Black community.
Hey guys, Future Rissa here. I just wanted to add a bit of commentary that didn't make it to the final cut, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The no snitching policy has many rules depending on your culture. For example, in the gang culture, obviously snitching is a no-no, unless the snitch is an actual killer. There's been so many cases where the snitch ended up catching more bodies after becoming an informant. Street gangs will absolutely check a snitch with no bodies, but if they got bodies, let it be. They have their own means of dealing with that kind of stuff, okay? That's their no snitch policy. And then you got folks talking about dry snitching. Listen, anybody that gets on social media telling everybody business that don't concern them are the ones dry snitching. I believe social media is fun and great and has a ton of great benefits, but I also believe it has somehow turned even the scariest of gangsters into baby back bitches. I've always had a hard time respecting gangs, especially the ones that condone violence against women and children, but have literally never done a drive-by on a grand wizard. All them FBI and CIA agents that had a hand in the deaths of our most powerful leaders, they violated. Now, if I ran up in blue country sporting red, I'd be raped 6 ways to Sunday and left for dead. But y'all just gonna let J. Edgar Hoover live a peaceful life? Make it make sense. I'm getting dangerous here. Listen, the point is, there's all types of snitching, and sometimes there are reasons to snitch. But when it comes to the advancement of the Black diaspora, there needs to be a zero tolerance for a manumitted ass nigga. Now, back to the show. Actually, no. I'm gonna make this a little bit fun. If you can, I did speed it up just a little bit, but if you can guess what it is that I'm rapping, it's a song. It's an actual song. If y'all can guess what it is that I'm actually rapping, I will send the first 5 people $1 on Cash App. Look, I'm a broke bitch, okay? That's all I can afford. Back to the show. Because it is not a chargeable crime, and with the addition of Black people being able to hold high positions of power, it makes it a lot harder for us to weed out who the troublemakers are, and it encourages us to close rank and gatekeep our strategies. Fighting from within used to be a sentiment that not many would question. But when you look at what all we have set out to accomplish, and what all has actually been done, it's hard to take that belief seriously. El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz once said this about progress. I will never say that progress is being made. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and you pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. If you pull the knife out all the way, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound. They haven't even begun to pull the knife out, much less try and heal the wound.
they won't even admit the knife is there. In 2023, when you see meritoriously manumissioned persons in office, it evokes a type of emotional stressor that is hard to identify. We know we don't like them or trust them, but we can't figure out why or how to keep certain people out of planning spaces. So, what can we do about the modern day ex-slaves that bear the willful intent to sabotage Black progress, both on a micro and macro scale? El Shabazz also said that they'll try to satisfy us with symbolic victory rather than economic equity and real justice. In Baltimore, right now, the crime rates are through the roof and civilians are fed up. The mayor, Brandon Scott, explains why police are not the sole solution to public safety and says a lot of great things.
Creating public safety and safety in neighborhoods, not the sole solution. We have had police officers for decades run into calls for service about substance abuse and mental health. They're not trained to deal with that properly. We have folks that go to college and get degrees to do just that. That's what we have to build here. That's what we're building here in Baltimore, because it's a both and. It's not an either or. And if you grew up in a neighborhood like mine where I saw people get shot, the first time I saw someone get shot, I wasn't even 7 years old. You understand that we need police focused out on the streets, on the people that are carrying illegal guns in our communities, shooting and robbing people. Here in Baltimore, with 500 less police officers that we had in 2014, we actually took more guns off the street and made more gun arrests because we're freeing our officers up to focus on those people. But at the same time, we are growing our community violence intervention ecosystem with programs like Safe Streets, where we pay folks who used to be violent to go out and intercede in that violence. We're doing partnership with folks like We Are Us. People, men in Baltimore who want to get involved in their own community and solve those problems. We're leading the way with our 911 call diversion, where we send behavioral crisis response folks out to those calls. It's all of the above. And at the same time, we're doing it in a city in partnership with our school system in our state that's built or renovated more new schools than any major city in the country. We've opened 5 new rec centers in our community over the last 2 years. We are doing all of the things, and we know that we have to do even more, including going after gun companies who are purposely putting the guns in the hands of people that shouldn't have them, going after gun traffickers in a city where 60% of the weapons we recover come from other states, and making sure that people that we arrest for murder, for robbery, for shootings, get turned over to the other parts of the justice system and get what they deserve so those families get peace, all while leading our police department through a consent decree and reforming it into a constitutionally operating police department.
Still so very young and has time to do more. I just won't be singing any praises until I actually see something happen. I'm sure that almost no Black politician goes in the game with the intention of upholding the status quo, but rather to change from within. We see where change from within gets us. We see where marching gets us. We see where peaceful protesting gets us. And unless social media blows up about it, it'll never hit mainstream. And if it doesn't become mainstream, politicians won't care about it. To answer the question of what we do about the modern day ex-slaves, there is nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we can do to rid ourselves of them. There will always be someone that is more than willing to subvert the economic growth of Black Americans. Instead of focusing on minimizing the amount of infiltrators by means of secrecy, I believe the focus should be placed on who's admitted to what information. Look at Scientology. Nobody ever knew what they were actually doing because information was layered, but everyone had at least heard of it. It's honestly just a matter of refocusing attention to expect breaches and have regularly enforced safeguards. The watchers will have watchers who may or may not have watchers. Seeing as how this is getting dangerously close to how to start a revolution 101, I'm gonna end the video right here. Okay, that's it. Bye. I'm not gonna do a trick. Just go. Whatever. Did you think I had real people clothes on? Which was made to, okay, I don't know that for sure. And even though some enslaved people received small parts of Arabian Nights in the Francis Burton in the Burton Notes, however, former slave was to Are you fucking kidding me right now? What the fuck is this? Why? Nobody wants to hear your piece of shit music. Jesus fuck.